Around 30 Russian armored vehicles and support trucks surged toward Pokrovsk in a single mechanized push, and bad weather plus drones turned much of that movement into burning wreckage in snow and mud within a short window. That number alone is serious. Columns of that size are not routine probes. They are designed to break a line, force a retreat, and create a headline. Yet the most frightening detail is not the scale of the assault or the sound of artillery. It is the image of one Ukrainian M1 Abrams sitting in thick morning fog, looking almost too exposed, almost like a mistake waiting to be punished. If this was simple luck, the story would end there with one clash and one outcome. But if that tank was part of a wider plan shaped by UAV surveillance, pre-planned fire zones, and coordinates moving in real time, then the real weapon was not the steel hull in the field. The real weapon was the network above it. A system that can see movement through sensors, track a pause, and strike the moment a column slows down. This is why the fight near Pokrovsk matters. Modern war in 2025 and 2026 is no longer decided by who brings more armor to the field. It is decided by who connects sensors to firepower faster and who breaks the enemy's rhythm first. So one question remains in that morning fog. Who is truly surrounding whom? Fog sits low over the fields outside Pokrovsk, and the ground is wet enough that every tracked vehicle leaves a deep, dark groove behind it. Engines idle longer than normal as drivers pick their way through soft patches. Then, the noise spikes when a column has to climb a small rise or push through churned mud near a tree line. In that gray morning, a Ukrainian M1 Abrams comes into view in an open strip of terrain near broken walls and a ruined farm edge. From the Russian side, the tank looks exposed and oddly still, with no obvious infantry moving around it and no clear smokescreen marking friendly cover. A few seconds of observation turn into a rush of radio calls. Then vehicles begin to fan out and shift lanes, because the chance to catch an Abrams in the open feels rare and time-sensitive. Armored personnel carriers and infantry fighting vehicles creep forward first, and infantry squads ride close and low, ready to drop off fast once the column reaches firing distance. As the lead elements advance, the fog hides small details, but it does not hide motion, so silhouettes appear and vanish between thin lines of trees, and tracks cut fresh paths across the damp ground. A forward vehicle slows at a muddy dip, then accelerates again, and the next vehicles break in sequence, creating a brief accordion effect where spacing shrinks and the group compresses. Drivers correct their heading to avoid a bog down. Gunners swing their turrets to cover the flanks, and dismounts grip handholds as the column shifts from one track to another. The Abrams remains in sight, and that steady shape becomes the anchor point that pulls the entire approach forward. Closer in, Russian infantry begin to peel off the vehicles in short bursts, using shallow ditches and low rubble as stepping stones, while the armored line keeps moving to build a loose ring around the tank. Some crews fire short bursts at likely hiding places, not because targets are confirmed, but because the fog makes every dark window and every crater feel like a threat. The terrain around Pokrovsk is already scarred, and routes matter here, so the thought of bringing down a Western tank carries a second purpose beyond the immediate fight. A Russian vehicle edges toward a side approach to cut off a possible escape lane, while another holds a wider arc, trying to keep the Abrams centered in a triangle of pressure. Infantry leaders gesture forward, and small groups push along the tree line to close the last gaps, because the goal is to be close enough that the tank cannot simply reverse and disappear into the fog. At the same time, the column has to keep moving, since any long stop in wet ground risks immobilization, and a stalled vehicle would block the line behind it. The approach continues in short surges, then short checks, and the sound of tracks and engines becomes a steady, heavy beat under the low sky. Right there, at that decision point, the situation becomes a test of nerve as much as a test of timing. Should the order be to strike right away while the Abrams still looks alone? Or should the force pause for 10 minutes and probe for signs that the open position is a trap? The encirclement begins as a coordinated move, because Russian commanders try to close space around the Abrams before it can slip away into the fog. One group pushes from the east along a thin tree line, because the branches and uneven ground can hide the shape of vehicles until the last stretch. A second group advances from the south across more open terrain, because a wide approach gives room to spread out and build pressure from a different angle. A third element stays back as a reserve, ready to surge forward once the Abrams is fixed in place and the ring is almost closed. The plan depends on speed, so vehicles do not crawl forward in one long line. They split into smaller packets, and each packet tries to keep enough spacing to avoid one hit turning into multiple losses. Infantry ride close to the armor, then drop off in short bursts when the terrain offers a ditch, a crater line, or a low wall that can break sight lines. Teams move with their heads down and their weapons forward, and they aim to reach positions where they can watch the tank and block a quick retreat route. As the eastern group moves, a lead vehicle edges closer to the tree line, then cuts slightly inward to keep the Abrams centered in its sights. The southern group does the same from a wider angle, and the two movements are meant to force the tank into a narrow choice, which is to stay and fight or reverse into ground that may already be covered. Radio traffic rises because each element needs updates on distance, direction, and timing, and the fog makes visual signals unreliable. Once the first vehicles reach a useful range, suppressive fire begins, and it comes in short, controlled bursts rather than one long stream. Machine guns rake likely observation points, and autocannons punch into broken windows and dark corners, trying to deny any hidden spot where Ukrainian infantry could be guiding fire. Smoke appears in patches, both as concealment and as a way to mask small shifts in position. A vehicle pulls forward, fires, then rolls back a few meters, while another slides into the gap and repeats the pattern. From the outside, it looks like steady pressure, but inside the formation it feels like constant adjustment, because the ground is soft and the angles keep changing. The reserve element receives a call to prepare, and engines rev as crews wait for the signal to close the last distance. That signal does not come as cleanly as planned, because the approach forces repeated microstops. A driver hesitates at a muddy dip, another vehicle swings wide to avoid getting stuck, and a brief pause spreads backward as the next machines brake to prevent a collision. Infantry who just dismounted have to freeze, since moving in the open at the wrong moment can draw fire from the tank or from unseen positions. A squad leader raises a hand, points to a new path, and the group shifts. Then the armor behind them shifts too, trying to keep the same timeline. Those short halts become a pattern. Vehicles stop to correct alignment, then move again, then stop once more when a route looks worse than expected. The ring is still forming, but each correction costs seconds, and in this kind of fight, seconds can decide whether the Abrams is fixed or still free. A command comes through to keep pushing, and the southern group tries to tighten its arc. A vehicle noses forward to block a gap, then backs up slightly to avoid exposure, while infantry rush to occupy a shallow depression that offers a firing lane. The eastern group attempts to mirror that move, and the idea is to deny the Abrams the ability to pivot and break out. At the same time, the need to hurry creates the very problem the plan fears most. Every time the formation slows, it leaves a clearer rhythm in the mud and in the open spaces between cover, and the encirclement begins to look less like one smooth ring and more like several parts trying to meet on schedule. The fog does not stop the opening shot, because the Abrams fires first at the moment the Russian ring begins to tighten. The eastern group is still moving in short surges along the tree line, and the southern element is trying to close a gap across open ground, when a single 120mm round breaks the morning. The blast is not just loud, it is decisive, since the target vehicle flares and smokes in a way that tells everyone nearby that this was not a warning. A turret jerks, the column breaks, and a clean plan becomes a rushed reaction, because crews now know they are inside the Abrams firing window. For a few seconds, the fog feels thicker, since nobody is fully sure where the shot came from, and the sound echoes off ruined walls and bare trees. Drivers hesitate, gunners swing their sights too fast, and infantry who just dismounted drop lower, because the open ground suddenly feels like a spotlight. Orders come through to keep pressure on the tank, yet the first instinct is to check angles and confirm lines, and that instinct costs time. The Abrams uses that time. It does not charge, and it does not retreat out of sight. It shifts its position by a small distance, using broken structures and shallow terrain dips, so the next shot can come from a slightly different point. That small move forces the Russian side to adjust again, because a ring depends on predicting where the center will be. Now the center has moved, and every arc has to bend to match it. The southern group attempts to answer with suppressive fire, and tracers stitch across the area where the tank was first seen. Autocannon rounds snap into rubble and dirt, and machine guns rake the edges of the field, trying to pin any supporting infantry. Smoke expands in patches, but the smoke is uneven, so it hides some lanes while leaving others exposed. A vehicle noses forward to close distance, then stops when the ground looks too soft, and another vehicle behind it brakes, and a third one shifts left to avoid bunching. In the fog, that sequence is visible as movement, even if the shapes are unclear. At the same time, a Ukrainian UAV circles higher than the fight, and it does not need a perfect picture to be useful. It tracks motion and spacing, and it notes every pause where a vehicle becomes a fixed point. Then, it pushes those points down the chain. On the ground, Russian crews start to feel the change in tempo. What was meant to be a smooth wrap around the tank now has gaps, since units are stopping to reassess and to avoid driving into fire. Infantry leaders try to pull squads forward to fill those gaps, but the men move in short bursts because they expect another shot at any moment. The Eastern group tries to re-establish confidence by pushing closer, yet the Abrams fires again, and the second impact deepens the shock. Even if the tank does not destroy every vehicle, it creates a rule in everyone's mind, which is that the next pause might be punished. This is the real value of the opening shot. It forces the attacker to slow down, and slowing down makes the battlefield easier to read for the side that is already watching from above. The Russian response shifts after the first shocks, because some commanders stop trying to close the ring with armor and instead try to disable the Abrams with a fast FPV strike. The logic is simple and urgent. If the tank loses mobility, then the encirclement becomes easier, and a stalled Abrams can be finished with heavier weapons once it is fixed in place. So a small infantry team is pulled from the moving line, and it slips along the edge of a tree belt and broken ground, carrying a compact FPV kit and batteries in packs. They move low and careful, since every step in wet soil makes noise, and every silhouette can be seen through gaps in the fog. Behind them, the main assault keeps trading fire with the Abrams, and that gunfire creates a loud curtain that can hide the sound of men moving, which is exactly what the team needs. The FPV group reaches a shallow depression near a cluster of dead brush, and the soldiers choose it because it offers cover from direct fire and enough open space to launch. One man sets the drone down, another checks the antenna and the feed, and a third scans the field for any sudden movement that might signal a counter team. The goal is not to punch through the tank's front arc, since that is the hardest face. The goal is to catch the Abrams from the side or rear, or to hit the track area, because even minor damage there can force a stop or a slow crawl. The team waits for the right second, since the tank keeps shifting position, and the fog can turn a clean approach into a blind dive. At the same time, the situation is changing around them. Russian vehicles keep making short stops to adjust their arcs, and infantry squads keep reforming after each burst of fire, so the battlefield has a rhythm that rises and falls in waves. That rhythm is not invisible. A Ukrainian UAV is still in the air, and it watches for patterns that do not match normal movement, like a small group that breaks off, stops in one spot, and stays there longer than a passing squad would. The FPV team does not know it, but their pause becomes a marker. A few seconds matter here, since the drone needs power, the controller needs a stable link, and the operator needs a clear line for a safe launch. Those seconds stretch in the wrong direction. The Abrams fires again, and the shock of another hit makes nearby Russian crews tighten up, and that tension forces more radio calls, more pointing, and more clustering around small cover points. The FPV team feels the pressure too, because now they hear voices on the net, and they know higher command expects a quick result. The operator lifts the drone, the motors whine, and the craft rises just above the brush line, trying to stay low until the last sprint. Then the first sign of trouble arrives. Rounds crack into the ground close to the launch spot, not in a wide pattern, but in a tight, corrected line that suggests someone has a fix. A second burst lands closer, and dirt sprays across the brush, and the operator realizes that the launch window is gone. The drone is already lost, and the team's scarred and injured, not sure how to make it out of their targeted place. The other groups abandon the attempt when they realize the loss, and they start pulling back in short move, attempt to escape the situation in the same way they used to reach the spot. That split is not spoken out loud, but it shows in movement. Some vehicles surge forward while others hold back. Some squads push for better angles while others seek safer ground, and the assault begins to lose its single direction. The decisive phase begins when the Russian formation loses its key vehicles, because a ring cannot close if the links between its parts are broken. A lead infantry fighting vehicle takes damage and slows. Then it tries to pull off the track to avoid blocking others. But the wet ground bites and the vehicle cannot regain speed. A second vehicle breaks behind it, and a third shifts wide into softer soil. And within seconds, the neat spacing turns into a crowded knot in the worst possible place. Infantry who were using the armor as moving cover now have to step off into open ground, since staying close to a stalled hull invites the next hit. They spread out in short rushes, but the fog and the uneven terrain make it hard to stay aligned, so small groups begin to drift apart as they seek any dip or rubble that looks safer. The first FPV strike comes in fast and low, and it hits a vehicle that is already struggling to move, so the impact turns delay into a full stop. Smoke rises, hatches pop, and the crew bails. And that single event creates a wider problem because the vehicles behind cannot pass without exposing their flanks. Another FPV arrives soon after, and it chooses a second target in the same congested pocket, not because that target is the most valuable on paper, but because it is the one that will block movement for everyone else. The blast forces more men to dismount, and now the infantry line has lost its shield at the exact moment it needs one. A squad leader tries to pull his people forward to keep pressure on the Abrams, yet the men hesitate, since the sound of a drone motor is now linked to instant punishment. This hesitation spreads without orders. Some soldiers drop flat and scan the sky, others rush for cover, and others freeze and wait for someone to tell them what is happening. At the vehicle level, gunners who were meant to keep suppressive fire on the Abrams start swinging their weapons toward the sky and toward the flanks, because the threat is no longer only in front. As more machines stop or burn, the Russian formation splits into separate clusters that cannot see each other through the fog and cannot coordinate their timing. Command attempts to restore order, but the moment for clean control has passed, since movement is now driven by fear of the next strike and by the need to find cover. It holds a position that keeps pressure on the closest threats, while Ukrainian drones maintain watch over the wider area, tracking any attempt to regroup or to bring up support. When a Russian group tries to gather behind a line of trees, a new strike arrives to break that concentration, and the message is clear that the area is being observed and managed. When this story is placed next to the larger mechanized pushes around Pokrovsk, one point becomes hard to ignore. More vehicles do not automatically mean more power, because a few lost minutes can turn a moving column into a set of fixed targets once drones and coordinate-based fire begin to shape the field. That is what happened here. The assault did not collapse only from damage, it collapsed from broken rhythm. And once rhythm breaks, spacing fails, then control slips, then the ring never closes. At the same time, this is not a simple Abrams victory story. A modern tank can still be pressured by drones, mines, and the tight conditions of this war, so it only matters when it sits inside a wider system that can see, share, and strike faster than the other side. That is the larger warning. War is sliding away from armor versus armor. So the next question is not about one foggy morning. It is about what comes next. If bad weather and mud still cannot hide movement from drones, will both sides reduce mechanized assaults to survive, or will they double down and wrap armor in thicker anti-drone layers? Which path looks more likely, and why? If this breakdown helped, support Military Force with a like, share it with someone who follows the war, and subscribe so the next analysis does not get missed.